A Sunday morning, an ordinary church, an ordinary service, nothing wrong with any of it. On the screen behind the platform, there is a thermometer. It is read up to about 2/3, and it went up this week, and somebody has put an arrow on it. At the microphone, a man is praying. It is a good prayer. It is well constructed, it is heartfelt, and about 2/3 of the way through it, there is a sentence that is very clearly aimed at one specific person sitting in the third row, and everybody in the building knows who. And before he sits down, he reminds the congregation that we are on day 14 of the 21 and asks for a show of hands from everybody who is still going. 3 things happened on that platform in about 4 minutes. And Jesus gave an instruction about each one of those 3 things. The same instruction, 3 times, in the same order, with the same words at the end of each. And it is the exact opposite of what just happened. So here is this video in one sentence. In Matthew chapter 6, Jesus tells you to do 3 specific things in private. He repeats the pattern 3 times so that nobody could possibly miss it. And the modern church has put all 3 of them on a stage. 3 things. I will number them out loud, chapter and verse for every one, and at the end I will give them back to you in a list. And each one ends with what to do instead, because a list of things your church gets wrong with no alternative is just a way of making you miserable on a Sunday. Now, before I go one step further, I need to say the most important sentence in this entire video, and I need you to hear it properly, because everything else depends on it. Jesus did not say don't do these things. He said do them, hidden. All 3 are assumed. He does not say if ye give, if ye pray, if ye fast. He says when. Every time. Giving, prayer, and fasting are taken completely for granted as things a believer does. What he is regulating is not the act. It is the audience. And one more thing, because I know how this sounds when a video like this gets going. The man at that microphone is not a hypocrite. I want to say that plainly. He did not invent the thermometer, he did not design the 21 days, and he did not choose the format. He inherited a room that was already arranged that way, and he is doing his sincere best inside it. And almost every pastor watching this is in exactly the same position. The format is what I am aiming at, not the man standing in it. Before the first one, 2 quick things, and then I will not interrupt the scripture again until the end. Make sure you are subscribed so the next one does not slip past you. And tell me in the comments what city you are watching from tonight. I read them, all of them, and I pray for the names of the places I see. And let me be honest about where this comes from. I did not learn this in a seminary. I learned it at a kitchen table with an open Bible on an evening when I had spent the morning being thanked publicly for something I had given, and going home feeling strangely emptied by it rather than encouraged, and not being able to work out why. Then I read Matthew 6 slowly for the first time in my life. I wrote down what I found in a short guide I called Be Your Own Pastor. Keep the title in the back of your mind. Now, before the 3, let me show you the shape of the passage, because the shape is the argument. Matthew chapter 6 opens with a heading, in verse 1, that governs everything that follows. Take heed that ye do not your alms before men, to be seen of them. Otherwise ye have no reward of your Father which is in heaven, to be seen of them. Hold on to that phrase, because I am going to come back to it at the end, and it settles the whole objection. And then Jesus does something structurally very deliberate. He gives 3 examples, and he builds all 3 the same way, out of the same 5 pieces. First, the warning, do not do it like this. Second, who does it like that? The hypocrites. Third, their motive, that they may have glory of men, that they may be seen of men, that they may appear unto men to fast. Fourth, the verdict, and it is identical every time. They have their reward. And fifth, the instruction, always some version of, but you. Do it where nobody can see, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. 5 pieces, 3 times, same order. That is not a man making a point. That is a man hammering a nail. Number 1, giving. Matthew 6, verse 2. Therefore, when thou doest thine alms, do not sound a trumpet before thee, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. And then verse 3, and this is where it goes further than anybody expects. But when thou deest alms, let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth. Read that again, because it is much stronger than not telling other people. Let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth. That is not a rule about publicity. That is a rule about your own inner bookkeeping. It is a picture of giving so instinctive, so unself-conscious, that even you are not keeping the ledger. Not, do not brag about it. More like, do not sit there afterwards being aware of it. And then verse 4, that thine alms may be in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret himself shall reward thee openly. Now look at what happens to giving in a modern church. It is frequently the single most public moment of the service. There is a thermometer, or a progress bar, or a chart. There are named giving levels. In some buildings, there are literal plaques on walls and on the ends of pews with the names of donors on them, which is a thing I want you to hold next to verse 3 for a moment. There are announcements of totals. There is applause. There are, in some places, categories of membership that depend on the amount. And I want to be very careful and very fair here, because there is a real distinction, and if I blur it, I will be teaching you something false. A church has an absolute obligation to be open about what it does with money. That is not vanity, that is integrity, and Paul makes a point of it in 2 Corinthians 8, providing for honest things, not only in the sight of the Lord, but also in the sight of men. Publish the accounts, show the outgoings, let anybody who gave see where it went. That is accounting for what the church received. Publicity about who gave it is a completely different thing. And it is the thing Matthew 6, verse 3, closes down. The church has a duty to show what it does with the money. Nobody has a duty to show where it came from, what to do instead. And this one is very simple and rather uncomfortable. Give something this month that nobody will ever know about. Not your regular giving. Something extra and completely invisible, with no receipt, no mention, no hint, dropped 6 weeks later in a conversation. And then find out how you feel about it, because that feeling is extremely informative. And there is one account in the New Testament that shows you how seriously this is taken, and I want to handle it soberly, because it is the heaviest passage in the book of Acts, and it is usually preached for the wrong reason. Acts chapter 5. Ananias and Sapphira. The situation is that believers are voluntarily selling property and bringing the proceeds to the apostles for distribution. Ananias sells a possession, keeps back part of the price, and brings the rest, and presents it as though it were the whole amount. Now, everybody remembers what happens to them. That is not what I want you to look at. I want you to look at what Peter says the offense actually was, because he states it in a single sentence and almost nobody quotes it. Verse 4, whiles it remained, was it not thine own? And after it was sold, was it not in thine own power? Read that carefully, because Peter is doing something extraordinary. He is saying, the property was yours. Nobody made you sell it. And after you sold it, the money was yours too. There was no obligation on you at any point. He could have kept the whole thing, legitimately, without sin. Peter says so, out loud, in the middle of the confrontation. So the sin was not the amount. It was not withholding. It was not greed. Exactly. It was the performance. The crime was arranging things so that a room full of people would believe something about his generosity that was not true. He wanted a reputation he had not paid for. He wanted the glory of men at a discount. And Peter names who was actually being addressed by that performance. Thou hast not lied unto men, but unto God. That is Matthew 6, verse 2, playing out in real life with the volume turned all the way up. The trumpet, the synagogue, the glory of men. Except here, the trumpet was a figure, and the amount was a lie, and the audience was the church. I am not telling you that a thermometer on a screen is Ananias. Of course it is not, and I am not going to be silly about this. What I am telling you is that Scripture treats the gap between what a room believes about your giving and what is actually true as a serious matter. Serious enough that the one time it is dealt with directly, it is dealt with in the gravest chapter in Acts. And every mechanism that makes giving visible is a mechanism that creates that gap. Not deliberately, automatically. Number one, in one sentence, he did not say be modest about your giving. He said, do not even let yourself keep track of it. Number two, prayer. Matthew 6, verse 5. And when thou prayest, thou shalt not be as the hypocrites are. For they love to pray standing in the synagogues and in the corners of the streets, that they may be seen of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. Notice the locations he picks: synagogues, the religious room, and corners of the streets, which is not a random detail. A street corner is where two streams of foot traffic meet. It is, in an ancient city, the position of maximum audience. He is describing somebody choosing the acoustics. And then verse 6. But thou, when thou prayest, enter into thy closet, and when thou hast shut thy door, pray to thy Father which is in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly. Enter into thy closet, shut thy door. That word closet in the King James means a storeroom, an inner room, the small windowless space where you kept things, not a place of beauty, a cupboard. He is saying, go into the least impressive room in the house and close the door behind you. And then verse 7, which belongs to this and almost always gets separated from it. But when ye pray, use not vain repetitions, as the heathen do, for they think that they shall be heard for their much speaking. For their much speaking. He is warning against length as a strategy. And here's the thing that took me years to notice, and it is sitting 2 verses later. Immediately after warning about too many words, he gives the model prayer. After this manner, therefore, pray ye, Our Father which art in heaven. Count it sometime. In English, it is around 60 words. 60. The model prayer of the Christian faith, given by Christ, positioned directly after a warning about talking too much, is about 60 words long, and it takes 20 seconds to say. Now look at prayer in a modern service. There is a microphone. There is a person praying to a room, which is a genuinely difficult thing to do without the room becoming the point. There is the prayer that teaches, where the content is aimed at the congregation rather than at God. There is the prayer that corrects somebody. There is the prayer that passes a message to a person who is listening. And there is the vocabulary. There is a whole dialect of public prayer, a set of phrases and cadences and words that nobody uses in any other part of their life, including when they pray alone in the car. That last one is the tell, and it is the most useful diagnostic I know. You can tell who a prayer is for by the vocabulary. Nobody talks like that on their own. What to do instead? Pray one prayer this week that is exactly 60 words, alone, out loud, with the door shut. And notice what falls out of it when there is nobody to hear it. Because whatever falls out was decoration, and it has been in your prayers a long time. And before I leave prayer, I want to show you something about the man giving the instruction. Because he did not only teach this, he lived it obsessively. And the Gospels are full of it once you start looking. Mark chapter 1, verse 35. And in the morning, rising up a great while before day, he went out and departed into a solitary place, and there prayed. A great while before day. That is not early. That is deliberately before anybody else is awake. Luke chapter 5, verse 16, describing it as a habit rather than an incident. And he withdrew himself into the wilderness and prayed. Withdrew himself. Repeatedly. It is written as a pattern. Matthew chapter 14, verse 23. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up into a mountain apart to pray. And when the evening was come, he was there alone. He sent the multitudes away first. He had a crowd, and he got rid of it in order to pray. And Luke chapter 6, verse 12, before choosing the 12. And it came to pass in those days that he went out into a mountain to pray, and continued all night in prayer to God. All night. Alone. On a hillside. Before the single most consequential personnel decision in human history. Now here is the detail that I find almost unbearable, and it is the thing that proves he meant what he said in Matthew 6. How do we know about any of this? We know because people noticed he was gone. Read Mark 1 again. He goes out before dawn, and the next verse says, Simon and the others followed after him, and when they had found him, they said unto him, All men seek for thee. They had to go looking. That is how the story enters the record. Not because he told anybody what he had been doing, but because his absence was conspicuous and somebody went to find him. He did the thing in the storeroom with the door shut over and over for years, and the only reason it is in your Bible is that other people kept having to come and get him. That is what obedience to Matthew 6 actually looks like from the outside. Not invisible, exactly, just never announced. Number 2, in one sentence. He told you to go into the cupboard and shut the door, and then gave you a prayer that takes 20 seconds. Number 3, fasting. Matthew 6, verse 16. Moreover, when ye fast, be not, as the hypocrites of a sad countenance, for they disfigure their faces, that they may appear unto men to fast. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward, that they may appear unto men to fast. Again, appear unto men. The third time in one chapter. And then verse 17, and this is the one that surprises people, because of what he actually commands. But thou, when thou fastest, anoint thine head, and wash thy face, that thou appear not unto men to fast, but unto thy Father which is in secret. He does not say, fast quietly. He says, groom yourself, wash, put oil on your hair, go out looking like a man who has just had a good breakfast. The instruction is to actively construct a normal appearance, to take positive steps so that nobody can tell. That is a stronger instruction than mere discretion. He is telling you to cover your tracks. Now, somebody is already objecting, and it is a fair objection, and I am going to give it to you properly rather than hoping you did not think of it. The Bible has corporate fasts. Joel chapter 2. Sanctify ye a fast, call a solemn assembly. Esther calls a 3-day fast among the Jews of Susa. In Acts 13, the leaders at Antioch fast together and send out Barnabas and Saul. So a called, communal, announced fast is plainly biblical. And that is true, and I hold it. But look carefully at what Matthew 6 is regulating, because it is not the calling of a fast. It is the appearance of the faster. Joel says, call an assembly. Jesus says, wash your face. Those two are not in conflict for 1 second. You can gather a whole city to fast and still have every individual in it come out of the house looking completely ordinary. He did not forbid fasting together. He forbade it being possible to tell who is fasting. And now hold that against a public countdown, a daily update on how many days in we are, and a request for a show of hands from those who are still going. What to do instead? If your church calls a fast, join it. Genuinely, that is a good thing. And then tell nobody at all how you are getting on with it, including the person most likely to ask, and especially in the week when you are doing well. Number 3, in one sentence, he did not say fast discreetly. He said wash your face so that nobody can tell. So there they are, all 3, in order. 1, giving. Do not even let your own left hand keep track. 2, prayer, the storeroom, the shut door, and 60 words. 3, fasting. Wash your face so that nobody can tell. And now let me deal with the sentence that appears after all 3 of them, because it is the same sentence every time, and it is the one that should stop us. They have their reward. That is not a threat. That is a receipt. He does not say they will be punished. He does not say God is angry with them. He says something quieter and far more disturbing. The transaction has been completed. They wanted to be seen. They were seen. They have been paid in full, and the account is now closed. There is a note I should give you here, and then a warning about how much weight to put on it. Some people point out that the word behind have their reward was a commercial term, the kind of word used on a receipt to mean paid in full, nothing further owing. I think that is interesting. I also think the argument does not need it at all, and I would rather not build on a lexical point when the plain English is already unmistakable. They have their reward. In any translation you own, that means the same thing. And it is the contrast in verse 1 that gives it teeth. Otherwise, ye have no reward of your Father which is in heaven. So this is not a passage about being caught. It is a passage about being paid by the wrong person. And now I want to do the one thing that settles this completely, which is simply to keep reading. Because Matthew 6 does not stop at verse 18. We stop there because that is where the three examples end and where the sermon outline usually ends. But the chapter carries straight on, and what comes next is the explanation of everything we have just looked at. Verse 19, lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. Verse 20, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. And verse 21, which is the hinge of the whole chapter. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Now put that directly against what he has just said 3 times. They have their reward. What is the reward that the man with the trumpet received? Glory of men. What is the reward the man on the street corner received? He was seen. What did the man with the sad face get? People knew he was fasting. Every one of those is a treasure upon earth. That is the connection. And once you see it, the chapter becomes one single argument instead of a collection of topics. The 3 private disciplines are not a separate subject from the treasure teaching. They are the worked examples of it. Doing a spiritual thing publicly in order to be seen is not merely a bit vain. It is a transaction in which you take something that could have been stored in heaven and you cash it out immediately in the only currency available on earth, other people's opinion of you. Moth and rust get it, and they do. Ask anybody whose reputation carried them for a decade and then did not. And then verse 21 explains why he cares so much. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Not, your heart determines your treasure, the other way round. The place you store it is the place your heart migrates to. So a man who consistently takes his reward in public is not just losing a heavenly reward. His heart is quietly relocating to the room where the applause happens, and he will not notice it happening because it takes years. And the chapter finishes the thought in verse 24 in a sentence everybody knows and almost nobody connects to this. No man can serve 2 masters. Ye cannot serve God and mammon. That verse is usually preached as a warning about money. It is. But look where it sits. It is the conclusion of a passage that began with giving, praying, and fasting done for an audience. The 2 masters are not simply God and cash. They are God, and the thing you are actually working for when you do a holy act with one eye on the room. Now let me give the strongest objection its due, because it is a genuinely good one, and if you have been shouting it at your screen for 10 minutes, you are right too. Somebody will say, this cannot possibly mean what you are making it mean, because the Bible is full of public prayer. Jesus himself prays out loud in front of a crowd at the tomb of Lazarus. The church in Acts chapter 4 prays together with one accord, out loud. Solomon prays publicly at the dedication of the temple for an entire chapter. If praying in front of people were forbidden, half the Bible would be in breach of it, and every word of that is correct. But go back and read the reason Jesus actually gives, because he gives it 3 separate times and it is not the reason people remember. Verse 2, that they may have glory of men. Verse 5, that they may be seen of men. Verse 16, that they may appear unto men to fast. Every single time, the problem is stated as a purpose, not the fact of being seen, the aim of being seen. He never says, do not be seen. He says, do not do it in order to be seen. Those are 2 completely different sentences, and everything hangs on the difference. And the proof is in the very passage the objection uses. At the tomb of Lazarus, in John chapter 11, Jesus prays out loud in front of a large crowd. And then, in the middle of the prayer, he says out loud why. Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me, and I knew that thou hearest me always. But because of the people which stand by, I said it, that they may believe that thou hast sent me. He announces his own audience. He says, I am doing this out loud for their sake, so that they will believe. The purpose is their faith. The purpose is not his reputation. So the question this chapter puts to you is never, are people watching? The question is, would I still be doing this if they were not? And you already know the answer for every single thing on that platform. So do I. So does everybody. So let me ask you the real question and answer it honestly tonight in the quiet. What is the last spiritual thing you did that nobody found out about? Not that you did not brag about, that nobody found out about. No mention, no hint, no story told later in a way that let it slip out gracefully. Take a minute with that, because the answer is more diagnostic than any sermon I could preach at you. For a lot of us, and I include myself, and I have thought hard about this while writing it, nearly everything spiritual we do happens in a room with other believers in it, on a schedule that other people can see. That is not wickedness. It is architecture. The rooms were built that way and we were handed them. But there is a whole category of life in Matthew 6 that most of us have almost no experience of at all. The part God sees and nobody else does. And Jesus says 3 times that this is where the reward is. Not most of it. The reward. And if that landed on you, if you have quietly inherited a way of doing everything in public and have almost nothing that is only between you and God, and underneath it, the deeper fear of standing before Him one day, having been paid in full by the wrong people, and hearing the most terrible sentence in the whole Bible, when Jesus says to religious, certain, church-attending people, "I never knew you. Depart from me," then let me point you toward the next step, because I am not going to leave you with only a feeling. Everything we walked through today, I wrote out plainly in that short guide. Be your own pastor. It is where I put the 3 protocols in order. How to read scripture for yourself with nobody standing between you and God. How to test what you have been handed against, what the passage actually says, and how to make the decisions of your own faith without asking a man's permission. I even put the verses on the priesthood of every believer in there in the original Greek. I am not going to put a number on it here. Go and see for yourself. It is linked right below this video, and there is a code on your screen right now that takes you straight to it. I made it for the believer who is done depending on any pulpit but Christ's. Now, before we close, let me say the fair thing one more time, and I mean it more at the end than I did at the start. The man at the microphone in the opening of this video is not the problem, and if that is your pastor, he is very probably a faithful man doing a hard job in a room somebody else designed. Almost nobody chose the thermometer. Almost nobody chose the countdown. These formats arrived, and they work, in the sense that they raise money and they generate participation. And that is exactly why nobody examines them. You do not have to fix your church this week. You cannot, and it is not your job. You can do 3 things by Sunday that nobody will ever know about. That is entirely within your power. And according to Matthew 6, it is where the whole reward is kept. So let me give you the 3, 1 for each item, and they are all small enough to do this week. Give something invisibly, not your regular giving, something extra, to a person or a cause, with no receipt and no mention. And here is the hard part. Do not tell your closest friend either. That is usually where it leaks, and it leaks in a way that feels like sharing rather than boasting, and it is still the trumpet. Pray once with the door shut. Actually shut. 60 words, out loud, alone, in the least impressive room in your house. And notice which of your usual phrases you cannot make yourself say when there is nobody to hear them. Those phrases were furniture. And skip 1 meal without telling anybody. 1. And then wash your face and go about your day looking exactly as normal as you looked yesterday, and let the entire thing pass with no human being on earth knowing it happened. None of that will change your church. It will change something quieter and more important, and you will know within about a week what it changed. If this channel has been feeding something real in you, do 2 small things for me. Make sure that subscribe button is on and the bell with it, so the next thing I open finds you. And if you want to help us put this in front of somebody who has never once been walked slowly through Matthew chapter 6, you can tap join and become a member of this ministry. Think of it only as sowing into the work, nothing more than that. And if you cannot, you are still family here, fully. Either way, stay. The next video I am putting in front of you right now is the honest next step from here. Because once you have seen 3 things moved from private to public, you will start noticing what else in that building was moved and by whom. Go watch it while this is still burning in you. And until then, go and read Matthew chapter 6, verses 1 to 18 tonight. 18 verses. And read it looking for the repetition, the warning, the hypocrites, the motive, the receipt, and the shut door. 3 times. Same shape. He was hammering a nail. May the Father which seeth in secret keep your heart and your mind. And may He give you something this week that is only His, that nobody else will ever hear about, not even once, not even by accident, until we open the Word together again.